In this lesson, we will learn about Hybrid Microsoft Entra ID joint devices. First, we will learn about a typical Hybrid Entra ID joint environment. Then we will learn about the Hybrid Entra ID device registration process. And finally, we will conclude our lesson with the review questions. Here is a typical hybrid Entra ID joint environment. Initially, we have an Active Directory domain with multiple OUs. In each OUs, we have computers joined to the Active Directory domain. We also have an Entra ID tenant. Now, to make these computers becomes hybrid Entra ID joint computers, we need to install an Entra ID Connect server in which we will configure the SCP which will public a service connection point. The service connection point contains the Entra tenant ID and the Entra tenant name, which helps these computers to allocate the Entra ID tenant. We can also specify the OUs with their objects will be synchronized to the Entra ID tenant. The objects in other OUs will not be synchronized to the Entra ID tenant. To make the registration happen, Microsoft creates a built-in schedule task that is responsible for hybrid join registration. The task name is Automatic Device Join and it is at the location Task Scheduler Library, Microsoft Windows Workplace Joins, and the task runs at log on or periodically every hour or so. Please note that this task is created by default on supported Windows version like Windows 10 or 11 or Windows Server 2016 or later. It is not dependent on OU membership or Entra ID connection scope. Now let's analyze how this Windows 10 device joins to the Entra ID and becomes a hybrid Entra ID joint device. As you can see, this device have already joined to the Active Directory domain, and here is its computer objects in the Active Directory. Now, after the user successfully sign in to the device gets the ticket, granting ticket, and service tickets from Active Directory, which are the proof of identity for single sign-on. The device then runs the automatic device join task, which triggers dsrec command.exe to read the service connection point from Active Directory to discover the Entra ID tenant and uses the kprot tickets from domain controller to authenticate to Entra ID by leveraging integrated Windows authentication. The Entra ID validates and issues the ID token to the device. The dsrec command.exe then generates a self-signed device certificate and writes that certificate to the user certificate attribute on the AD computer objects. Next, it initiates the device registration process with Entra ID. The Entra ID Connect sets up synchronization rules to synchronize the computers from selected OUs that have user certificate attributes. It sends attributes like user certificate, device ID, and operating system. In this case, only these computer objects have the user certificate attributes and it is in the selected OUs, so it will be synchronized to Entra ID. Next, the device creates the device key pair used for authentication and the transport key pair used to transmit the device certificate between the device and Entra ID. If the TPM chip is available on the device, these keys are stored in the device TPM. Otherwise, they are stored at the software key store. Now, the device constructs and sends the device registration request to Entra ID containing the device public key, the transport public key, the user ID token, device metadata containing device ID, hostname, domain, and so on. Upon receiving the request, Microsoft Entra ID validates the user token and device keys. Then it matches the request to the synth ID device objects via objects GUID to ensure the device is allowed to register. After a successful validation, Entra ID generates a device certificate, encrypts it using the transport key, then sends it to the client device. The device decrypts the message using the transport private key to get the certificate and store this certificate locally and use it for future authentication. The device now has a valid device certificate, a registered device objects in Entra ID, and the status Azure AD Join set to yes. Let's now conclude our lessons with the review questions.